So let's see. We're up to on page Yudches Amud Aleph on 18a, towards the bottom of the page, and we're up to continuing V'haloyes Sheshama Ashuris. Loyes means somebody who speaks another language. Loyes stands for Amzul, a different language. Any other language is called a Loyes. So a Loyes who hears Ashuris. Ashuris, that's Hebrew, Loshen Kodesh, the Ksav Ashuri, and that's the Loshen Kodesh. So somebody who doesn't speak Hebrew, and he hears the Megillah in Hebrew, he hears the Megillah in Loshen Kodesh. So we're saying, Aloyes Sheshoma Ashuris Yotzo. He has fulfilled his obligation. The person inevitably doesn't understand the language. The person who speaks English, say, he hears the Megillah reading in Hebrew, he doesn't understand the Hebrew. So the Mishnah says that the loyes, that the person who doesn't speak Hebrew, as long as he heard it Ashuris, Yatza, he fulfilled his obligation. So the Gemara asks, V'ho lo yoda mai ka'amri. But he doesn't know, he doesn't understand what is it that they're saying. He has no idea what they're saying. So how does he fulfill his obligation? He hears words, and those words don't mean anything to him. So why would he be fulfilling his obligation? And the Gemara answers, Midi dahavi hava anoshim ba'amei haaretz. Just like women were assumed, all women were assumed that they may not know Hebrew. Amei haaretz means the not learned people. So how do women and not learned people fulfill their obligation of reading the Megillah? So just like the women, most of the people understand. The women, the not learned, don't understand. So I guess that would be sufficient for the non-speaking Hebrew people to fulfill their obligation as well. So Ravina attacked this. Matkif lo Ravina. Ravina challenged this. What exactly is Ravina's challenge? So it's a little bit difficult. I'm not sure exactly what his challenge is. I think the way I understood it when I was learning the Gemara, I understood that his challenge is, what kind of a question is it even? Rabavina attacked the question. He says, what problem do you have with the women that they don't understand what they're saying? What problem do you have with the people that speak English or other language? They don't understand. He says that's not even a problem. In other words, the way I understood it is, the Matkif lo Ravina, he was attacking the question, not the answer. He was asking basically, it's not a problem. Why are you asking me that they don't know what they're saying? That's not even a problem. Because he says what? Because he says, listen, there's some words in the Megillah that even we don't understand what they mean. And yet, it's okay. He says like this, Otu, Anon, is then us. The Megillah uses the language Ho'achashtronim b'nei haramochim. This was used for the people that actually went out very quickly to deliver the messages. They were these very quick writers who went to give out the messages of about the king's decree. And that is something which is not a Hebrew word or context. The Achashtronim b'nei Ramochim. So basically, he's saying that pasuk, miyadi'inon. Do we then know what that means? We don't have an idea what that means. Achashtronim b'nei Ramochim. And yet, so how do we fulfill? We don't understand. Elo mitzvahs kriya pirsum nisa. The mitzvah is not to understand every word. You don't have to know exactly what the Achashtronim b'nei Ramochim, what it means. You don't have to know the type. Elo mitzvahs kriya pirsum nisa. The mitzvah is to read and to publicize the miracle. That's what the mitzvah is, not to understand every word. Hachanami. So the same thing is in the case of the person who speaks only the English or another language. There is mitzvahs kriya. It's the mitzvah to read, upirsum nisa, to publicize the miracle. Whether they understand or not, that's not the important part. Because the main thing is that they hear the Megillah reading and the miracle is publicized. Rashi goes further. Rashi says, even though they don't know, the people that don't know the Hebrew language, they're sitting in the Megillah, they're hearing the Megillah, they don't know what they're hearing. They're hearing the Megillah, but they don't know because they don't speak Hebrew. They only speak English. But still, shoyalim and sashoimim, they will ask those who do listen, and they say to them, Mahi yakriya hazu. What is it that you're reading, this reading there? How was the miracle? And they tell them. So in other words, the fact that you're reading it publicly, so even though they don't understand, but they'll ask and they'll question, and you'll tell them what's going on. So that's the way to publicize the miracle. So basically, he's saying it's not an issue of the fact that they don't know some of the words. Nobody knows some of the words. Even the people that speak Lashon Kodesh may not know what Achashtronim b'nei Haramochim. Those are foreign words in the Megillah, and yet we're listening. Not a problem, because the mitzvah is to read the Megillah and to publicize the miracle. If you don't understand a few words, doesn't matter. Here too is a mitzvah to read and to publicize the miracle. It seems like Rashi is bothered, but over here it doesn't seem like they know everything. How are you going to publicize the miracle? If you don't know two words, what does it mean? Okay, you don't know two words, no big deal. You know you're publicizing the miracle. But if you don't understand at all, so how's they going to publicize the miracle? You don't understand what they're reading about. So that's why Rashi explains it even more. He says, even though the people that are listening don't understand at all what is being discussed, but they will ask the other people that listen, and they will tell them what is it that they're reading about, how the miracle was, and they'll let them know, so it will be publicized that way. I understand, when I was learning, I understand the Matkiflo Ravina was a challenge to the question. The Gemara originally asked a question, they don't know the person who speaks English. Now we'll use the English as an example. Doesn't know what they're saying. The Gemara answered because it is like the women and the Amaris don't know what they say. So the Gemara Ravina is saying, well, what kind of a question is it in the first place? And he's saying, because you don't really have to know anything. Hello, is it an emergency? What? I'm in the middle of a class. Thank you for sending me. Okay, not an emergency. Okay, thank you. Yeah. I'm in the middle of class now. I'll talk to you afterwards. Thank you. She's due any minute. Today is her due date. So she's calling me. I wanted to make sure it's not an emergency. So sorry about the interruption. Okay, so no emergency. She says she's usually 2 weeks late after her due date. So today is her due date. So anyways, so the Gemara, so the way I understood it, the Gemara says it's not even a problem in the first place that they don't know what they're talking, because we don't need to know exactly what you're talking about. So the Gemara is basically challenging the challenging question. But in the language of the Gemara, it doesn't sit so well. So maybe the pshat is that first the Gemara said, well, women in Amaretz, some of them don't know, maybe it's okay. And then the Gemara's question is basically, well, we don't know, nobody knows what a chashtron and a ramachim need. The Gemara says it doesn't matter. Well, whatever exactly the case, the question is, whatever it is. The Gemara says the mitzvah is to read, and the mitzvah is to publicize the miracle. Whether you understand every word of it or not, this is the important part about the Megillah reading, because even if you don't understand, you'll ask the person next to you, and they will tell you what's going on. All right. The Mishnah, we're going to go further. The Mishnah says, Korah Sirugin. Sirugin means he read it with interruptions. Let's say you read one chapter and you take a break, and then you read another chapter, a third chapter, or several verses. Sirugin means basically piece by piece. You don't read it straight through. So the Gemara says, Yotza, you fulfilled your obligation. You don't have to read it with one shot. You can read it piece by piece. Hold on. So the Gemara just says that Lo Yohavi Yodu Rabbanon My Sirugin. The rabbis, they were learning the Mishnah, the students in the yeshiva, they didn't know what does this Sirugin mean. Who is this? Lahavi Yad Rabbanon. Who is this Rabbanon? So Rashi says, Talmidei Rabbeinu HaKodesh. Those were the students of Rebbe. Rebbe, the holy Rebbe. Rebbe was the author of Yehuda Nossi, Rabbeinu HaKodesh. He was the author of the Mishnah. And the students that were learning the Mishnah, they didn't know what he was talking about. They didn't understand what is Sirugin. So the Gemara says, Shamu'uhu la'amsa debei Rebbe. So they heard the maid servant of Rebbe. The Ka'amru lahu l'Rabbanon. She was saying to the students, Dave'ayli paski lebei Rebbe. They were going in groups by groups to the house of Rebbe. In other words, the students didn't enter all at once. They would come a few, and they'd come in, then another few would come. So she said to them, Admosai atem nichnosim sirugin. How long will you go in? Groups by groups. In other words, why don't you all come in together? So from the fact that she told them, you're going in sirugin, they understood what it means in the Mishnah, sirugin. That sirugin means a piece at a time, then another piece, and then another piece, just like the rabbis would walk in. The students would walk in, not all together at once, but they'd come in a few at a time. That's how they learned what she meant with the sirugin. Gemara is going to give now several other examples in which the rabbis didn't understand exactly what the meaning of the words of the Mishnah, the Rebbe says, and they found it out by hearing what the maidservant of Rebbe said, and that's how they found out. So again, so the Gemara brings down several items. The Gemara says, Lahavi Yoda Rabbanon. The student didn't know what is Chalgalgoilis. You see the English word over here? What does this mean? I don't even know how to read it. Pour. Can anybody read it? Understand the words? This is that's the Chal Gilgoyla. This is a kind of a Por Tulaka or Laraka. See, yeah, it is a kind of a plant or something.
Portulaca is a flower.
What is it called?
It's a plant that flowers, a portulaca.
Yeah, it's a plant. It's a plant. Okay. So the Gemara, it's mentioned many times in the Mishnah. Rashi says it's a kind of a vegetable. So the rabbis did not know my chal lugloikos. What is this chal lugloikos? And so the Gemara said, Rashi says, min yereko. It's a kind of a vegetable. Bishonri become a mekom is Mishnah b'Braisa. It's mentioned many times in the Mishnah and the Braisa. So the rabbis didn't know what that is. Shom'uho la'amso de Rebbe. So the same as before, they heard the maidservant of Rebbe, the Amra Leila hu Gavra, she was saying to that person, the have komevarder parpechine. He was sort of throwing up his parpechina. That parpechina is that same. Rashi says parpechina is this pikakli belaz. I guess in Old French, it's called pikakli. It's still the same. It's the same thing here. So she saw him throwing up those this vegetable. So she said to him, how long are you going to be scattering your chalug, which is the parpechini? So I guess they knew what parpechini was, and since she called it scattering the chalugul goylach, they knew that parpechini is chalugul goylach, and that's what chalugul goylach is. When I say we don't know what chalugul goylach is, we don't know what the parpechini is, we don't know what the pikakli is. All right, maybe we know what this described. Okay, this is what it is. Anyways, but that's brought down here just to tell us that the maidservant, that she was able to teach them what it means. All right, then there's another thing. The Gemara says, "Lo hava yad rabbanon." The rabbis, the students of Rebbe, didn't know what is the meaning of the pasuk in Mishnah. It talks about the greatness of Torah. It says Sal Sileho. That talks about the Torah. If you're mesalsel the Torah, really, which means that you turn it and you search it, usrei mimecha, and that will raise you. Salseleho usrei mimecha. The Torah, if you search it and you turn it over and over, it will raise you. And then it said, "Techabdecha ki techabkeno." She will honor you if you hug her. If you hug the Torah will honor you. So they didn't know, the rabbis, what is the meaning of the word salsala? Utrei memeko. What does it mean? So again, shamuha la'amsa, the Rebbe. So they heard the maidservants of Rebbe, have a omris lahu gabra, have a mahapif b'mazia. She was telling this guy, he was twisting his hair. He had his hair, he was being mesalsel. She said to him, Amra lei, she said to him, Ad mosai ato mesalsel b'sayrecha. How long will you still be twisting your hair? So you see that twisting and searching, this is all called salsalom. In Torah, it means you look into Torah, you go back and forth, and you might, then the Torah will raise you. Mesalsel b'sarcho, she told him. B'madnu, so we see from this, shasilsul loshon chipus v'hipoch. That silsul means to search and to turn over. Same thing as the words of Torah. Turn them over and look, try to give and take to figure out what the Torah is saying. So that's the pasuk is saying. Sal salah, if you turn around the Torah and you look into it and you study it, then it will raise you. But these are also old things. Looks like she was quite a woman, this maidservant of the house of Rebbe. I mean, she ended up teaching these rabbis the various different things that they didn't know. Further, the Gemara says another thing. The rabbis didn't know. What is the meaning of Hashlich al Hashem Yehovcha? Basically, this is a pasuk in Tehillim, which says, "Throw on Hashem your load." Yehovcha means your load. Put your loads, put your problems, throw it on Hashem. And He will sustain you. Or in Chassidus, it tries Chalkilecha, He'll give you the tools, He'll give you the vessels. He'll never allow for the tzaddik to falter. But anyways, they didn't know what is the meaning of the word throw on your Shem Yehovcha. What is Yehovcha? Throw upon Hashem Yehovcha. So Amar Rabbi Chana, this is not anymore with the maidservant of Rebbe, but this is another rabbi giving the answer. So Rabbi Bar Chana said, but it's still similar. Somebody else came up with the explanation for a problem that the rabbis had. He says, I was one going with an Arab merchant. The Kodarino Tuna, I was carrying a load. So Ba'amar Li, he said to me, Shkoil Yehovich, take your load, Vishadi Agmaloi, and place it on my camel. Apparently the Arab had a camel that was going, and Rabbi Bar Chana was carrying the load. So he said, take your load and put it on my camel. So he called it Shkoil Yehovich, carry your load. So this is, we know that when we say Hashlech al Hashem Yehovcha, put your load on Hashem. Basically, if you have a load, you have troubles, you have problems, throw it upon Hashem, and Hashem will take care of all your problems. And He will never let the tzaddik falter. That's the interpretation of that verse. Gemara gives another case what the rabbis didn't know the answer to. The pasuk that says this is a pasuk in Yeshaya. It says v'samtiha lemoirash kipoid va'agmei moyim. This is in the Toichacha in Yeshaya about the land of Eretz Yisrael. Hashem said, "I will make it into agamayim." Then it says v'tei tiha b'metate. Today we know a metate is a broom. The Rebbe said, "I will sweep it with a broom." Hashmid, total destruction. Num Hashem tzvokas, says Hashem tzvokas. So this word v'tatei tiha b'metate says the rabbis didn't know. La'avid Rabbuna mai v'tei tiha b'metate. Hashmeid, what does it mean? So Shabu'ul Amsid Rebbe. Now we're going back to the Amsid Rebbe. Not sure why the Gemara brings in the middle this case of Hashlech al Hashem Yehovcha. It interrupts with the Amsid Rebbe, and it does so. It talks about something else. I'm not sure, but they heard the maidservants of Rebbe. She was saying to her friend, "Shkuli tat teita, take your broom, v'tate besa, and sweep the house." I guess the maidservant of Rebbe, she was in charge of other maidservants, or because she should be sweeping it herself. Why is she telling somebody else to sweep it? She's saying, "Shkuli ta teita, take your broom, v'tate beta, and to clean the house." She may have been the chief maidservant there, but in any event, you see from here, ta teita, Ishkufa Malaz. It means a broom, sweep it up. Anyway, so this is another. So I guess this is the only thing, it's not really in order. Over here with Rabbi Babachona, he was saying, Shkol Yavach. Why did the Gemara bring it in right there? Not after this, I'm not sure. It needs to be looked at. Okay, let's go back now to the Gemara. The Gemara goes back to the Bryce over here. In the Mishnah, we learned, if you read it Sirugin, Koro Sirugin, and we said Sirugin means a little bit at a time. One chapter, stop. Another chapter, stop. You didn't read the whole Megillah in one shot. The Mishnah said, Yotzo, you fulfilled your obligation. How much of an interruption we'll see soon? The Gemara wants to say you can't interrupt, according to one opinion, so long that you can do the whole Megillah in that time. So if you wait from one point, let's say the whole Megillah reading takes half an hour, let's say, the average of that person, by what we go, let's say it takes a half an hour to read the Megillah. So the interruption between one part and the other cannot take longer than it takes to read the whole Megillah. If the interruption is longer than that, then you have to go to the beginning, according to one in the beginning. We'll see in a minute. But anyways, the Mishnah just says the same thing the Bryce says here. Koro Sirugin, if you read it in pieces, a little piece at a time, Yotzo, you fulfilled your obligation. Amud Beis. What happens if you read it Sirusin? Sirusin means that you switch the order, like we learned in the Mishnah Mafreya, which means, let's say you do the second chapter before the first chapter, you swap the order, then lo yotza, then you were not yotza. So if you read the first chapter, you take a break and read the second chapter, is okay. But if you read the second chapter and then you start reading the first chapters later, that's not okay. Then you're not fulfilling your obligation. Rashi says Sirusin is lemafreya. Mafreya means backwards. Kamoi, like you find the words saris as samikra b'darshay. You have to switch around the pasuk and expound it. That's when we take the words in the pasuk. This is a common statement that we take the words of the pasuk that are later and we have to expound it for earlier. We also find yotza mechutach or mesuras. If talks about a fetus that comes out cut up, or mesuras means switched around, and therefore that's just an evidence for the word sirusin Rashi brings down. Okay, so basically the order has to be kept. If there's an interruption, that would be fine. So the Gemara comes up now with this opinion of Rabbi Muna, Oimer Meshum Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Muna says in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, Af bisirugin. Even if you read it in pieces, im shah kedei ligbar deskula. If you waited before you read the next piece, what it takes to complete the whole thing, then you have to go back to the beginning. In other words, you have to not make such a long interruption. Now, I'm wondering, we have to look at the halacha of this. What would happen if you make an interruption? So let's say the interruption is a half hour. We'll soon see in the Gemara also that it means you interrupted not from what it takes from this point to the end, but from the beginning to the end. So let's say you interrupted, it takes half an hour, you interrupted 25 minutes, and you start reading. Then you make another interruption for 25 minutes. You get to reset the clock, or you only got 5 minutes. Okay, we got to look up the specific halachas. But in any event, Amar Rabbi Yosef says, halacha ki Rabbi Muna she'amar mishum Rabbi Yehuda. Halacha is like Rabbi Muna that said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, basically that you cannot just make a too long of an interruption. You're reading the Megillah, it can't be more than it takes to finish the Megillah. But now we're not sure, what does it mean to finish the Megillah? Does it mean to finish the Megillah from the spot where you are at? Let's say you came up to chapter 9. Normally it takes you 5 minutes to finish. So are you only allowed to interrupt 5 minutes? Or you're allowed to interrupt what would take you to finish the whole Megillah from the beginning, a half hour. How much is it? Amalei Abai le Rabbi Yosef. So Abai says to Rabbi Yosef, when you say that you can't wait, is kidei ligmoir eskula? Is it what it takes to finish all of it? Which means, no, from where he's standing, at the place where he's standing till the end. So, like I said in the example, if he was up to chapter 9, he has only 5 minutes of interruption allowed to him. Otherwise, he would have to start from the beginning. Or we give him a half an hour, because it takes half an hour to read from the beginning to the end. So he also has a half an hour to read from the beginning to the end. So how much time? What did Rabbuna say? Amalei says no. It has to be the whole Megillah. So we're giving him basically a half an hour. What it takes. Now again, this is my question. What would it be? Would it given what it takes a quick person to learn the Megillah? This person to learn the Megillah, the average learning of the Megillah. Anyways, we have to read all these pratim, all these details in halacha. But we were just giving the general idea. But he told him that it has to be Bereishah L'Sefer. It has to be from the beginning to the end. Because otherwise, the imkain, if you're not going to do that, you've given your words to different measurement. Everybody, it's a different measurement. Nobody's going to know. If you say something very clear, specific, we know it's half an hour. We know what it takes to read the Megillah. But if you're going to say the place where you're up to, you're not giving a very clear ruling over here. We're never going to know exactly chapter 8, chapter 7, chapter 6. That would be too much fragmented, the shiurim, and therefore it has to be from the beginning to the end. My argument would be it still depends on the person, depends how fast he reads, depends, there's a lot of different factors over here. But the Gemara doesn't want to be making every spot in the Megillah different. That would be a not sustainable halacha to make it. So, okay. So that's what the Gemara says. That's what he answered. That's what Rabbi Yosef told Abai. Okay, now we're going to have, is the halacha like Rabbuna? In other words, we want to know, practically speaking, is the halacha like him? So we're going to have a whole bunch of rabbis. Omar Rabba Abba Rabbi Rabba. Omar Rav, he says name of Lav. Halacha ki Rabbi Muna. The halacha is like Rabbi Muna. Ushmul Omar, ain't halacha ki Rabbi Muna. Shmuel says the halacha is not like Rabbi Muna. Now, once we have a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel, usually we have the halacha is like Rav when it comes to laws of Isur. Halacha ki Rav Yisrael k'Shmuel b'Mamoina. When it's monetary issues, we rule like Shmuel. So he says, Rav says, halacha like Rabuna. Apparently, that's what we're going to rule like. But the Surah Machs Noachi, that's the way they said in Surah, that Rav says the halacha is like Rabuna. But Bepumpadissa, those were two cities in Iraq, in Babel. They learned it the other way. Amar Khan Amar Rav, he says, halacha ki Rabbi Muna, that it's not Rabbi Abba Rabbi Marav, but Rabbi Kano Marav halacha Rabbi Muna. And Shmuel Omar ain't halacha Rabbi Muna, by directly. So I guess the change over here is just in whose name it was said. Okay, that's just what happens with the oral Torah or the different yeshivas. So they passed it along. It's just a technical matter. It seems like, because here it just says Amar Rabba Abba Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba in the name of Rav, and here it's Amar Rav Khan Amar Rav. But the same halacha, the halacha Rabbi Muna. But Rabbi Bibi Masni Ibcha, he learned it the other way around. Rav Omar ein halacha Rabbi Muna. He said halacha not like Rabbi Muna. Shmuel Omar halacha Rabbi Muna. Here there's not even anybody said Omar Rabba. It's just Rav Omar. I'm not sure if he's just not writing it out or There's no other people saying the name, but he actually switches it around. If halacha is not like Rabbi Menuna, I think what he's basically saying that that's not what the halacha is. Since that's what the Rav says, and we pass like Rav, I guess that's why it makes so much of a difference. Shmuel Amar halacha Rabbi Menuna. So who's right? Now we don't even know who the halacha is because somebody says Rav says this, somebody says Rav says the other thing. So we have to know now: is the halacha like Rav Kahana, or the halacha is like Rabbi Bibi? Because according to Rabbi Bibi, Rav says the halacha is not like Rabbi Menuna. According to Rav Kahana, Rav says the halacha is like Rabbi Menuna. Again, I'm all of the assumption that if Rav says, whoever Rav says the halacha is, that's the halacha we go by. And Rabbi Yosef comes and says, you know what? I go along with what Rabbi Bibi said. He says, Nekoid Rabbi Bibi Yotcha. I go with Rabbi Bibi. Rabbi Bibi says, Rav says, En halacha Rabbi Menuna. Again, I think that what he's trying to say is that we don't follow Rabbi Menuna because we go like that version, like Rabbi said. Because Shmuel Omar halacha Rabbi Menuna. You see, in our Mishnah, in the Brisa, it doesn't say anything about disqualification. Rabbi came out, he says, that's assumed to be, that's his opinion. That doesn't follow the Mishnah. The Mishnah didn't make that qualification that you have to be able. So the Mishnah is considered the majority that wouldn't you don't need that. And even if you waited, you would still fulfill your obligation. Doesn't matter how long you interrupt. So the fact that Rabbi Yosef says, I'm going to go along with Rabbi Bibi that says that Shmuel says Loch Ragamnuna because the Shmuel the Chayish Lechidah. Because Shmuel usually worries about a single opinion. Basically, we find in another place in which Shmuel says that an opinion of one rabbi is something that concerns him, even though we're talking about when to be stringent, not to be lenient. That even though it's only an opinion of one individual, one rabbi, he's still going to follow it. In this case, Rav is saying, according to the version of Rabbi Bibi, Shmuel worries about Rabbi Menuna. He says the halacha is like Rabbi Menuna. Even though Rabbi Menuna is an individual, because the Mishnah didn't make that distinction. According to the Mishnah, even if you interrupt 2 hours, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't say any qualification. And yet, Shmuel says halacha Rabbi Menuna. He says that must be Shmuel, because Shmuel normally takes into consideration the opinion of an individual. Shmuel, who the Chayish Lechidah. Shmuel is the one that worries about a opinion of one rabbi, even the most of the rabbis don't agree to him. Therefore, Rabbi Yosef, you follow what I'm saying? This for Rabbi Yosef says, I'm going to go along with the version of Rabbi Bibi, that Shmuel is the one that says Loch Rabbi Menuna, because that places Shmuel in that same idea that we find elsewhere, that Shmuel would worry about individual opinion and go by it, even though the majority doesn't go by it. Now, worried about the single opinion doesn't mean to be lenient. It means to be more stringent. Like in this case, what does Shmuel say? Shmuel says, the halacha is like Rabbi Menuna, even though in the Mishnah it doesn't say, if you interrupted more than it takes to finish reading the end of the Megillah, you'd have to do it again. This is the opinion of Rabbi Menuna. It is Shmuel that worries for it. And Rashi says, the Chayish Lechidah, b'mokim shayochid machmir, Rabbi Mekilim, in a place where the individual is more stringent, and the Rabbim are Mekilim, like over here, like Korah B'Sirusi. So Rabbi Menuna is machmir, and even though the Mishnah is mekel, and they say that it's okay, he's chayes. So that's why he rules like Rabbi Yosef. Where do we find that Shmuel worries about an individual. So the Gemara brings down halacha of Shmuel, a totally unrelated halacha. The only thing that we see over there in that piece is that that Shmuel will go by an opinion of an individual. Now, we learned in the Mishnah. Shemeres Yobam Shekidish Ochiv Es Achois. Shemeres Yobam. So what happens? Two brothers, and one brother dies. And he's married to this woman and they didn't have children. So then there's the din of Yibum. Yibum means that the brother, the living brother, has to marry the deceased brother's wife. He has to marry her. He has an option, either to give chalitza or to marry her. Before he marries her, she's called a zekas yobam. Zeka means she needs the yobam. She needs him to either marry her or give her chalitza. Before he either marries and gives chalitza, she cannot go out and marry anybody else. The Torah says that he has to marry her or give her chalitza. She cannot go and get married to somebody else. That's called a zekas yobam. This woman whose husband died and has a living brother is called a zekas yobam. Now, what happens if this brother goes and marries her sister? In the meantime, if he was married to this sister, there were two brothers married to two sisters, right? So if he was married to two sisters, both of them were married before, then she can leave without, because there's a lav over there. He can't marry her. So then she's exempt from Yibum Chalitza because he's married to his sister. He can't marry her. Torah says he has to be able to marry her. What happens if he wants to marry the sister after the brothers died already? So this woman is already a zekas yobam. She's waiting for her yobam. He goes and marries the sister now. He can't do that. That's called the connection to that woman, the brother's wife, who the brother died. That connection doesn't allow you to marry her sister because it's called the zeka of the yavam. You have already a connection to that sister. Once the brother died, and you're supposed to be miyavim her. So there is a zeka over there, a connection. Zeka means a connection, and the sister. It's not all the people, but he rules like that. That the sister of the woman who was married to the brother isn't allowed to marry the brother now because he's already connected with that woman. Yes, after he gives her chalitza, fine. If he marries her, of course he's not allowed. You're not allowed to marry two sisters. The same man is not allowed to marry two sisters. Don't ask me about Yaakov, that's a separate issue. But one person is not allowed to marry two sisters. But we're saying the connection from the woman, the brother's wife, the brother died without children, to him doesn't allow him to marry her sister. Now it gets even better than this. What happens if there are two brothers? One brother died, there's two brothers. Who is supposed to do Yibum? The first dib goes to the older brother. He has to. But if he doesn't do Yibum or doesn't do Chalitza, then the next brother can do Yibum or Chalitza. So here the question becomes, does the second brother, is he allowed to marry the sister? Or since she is inevitably somewhat also connected to him, because if the other brother, the older brother, is not going to do Yibum Chalitza, the second brother is going to have to do it. That means that he's also not allowed to marry the sister because she's still connected to him. In the scenario that we're talking about over here, you have like this. What's the Mishnah say over there? Shomeres Yavam. Shomeres means she's guarding. She's waiting. She is guarding for the Yavam. In other words, she has to get married to the Yavam, to the oldest brother. Shekidesh Achiv. Then his brother, the older brother, the other brother, the younger brother of the Yavam. She was waiting for the Yavam. And the Yavam's brother, the other one of them died. That's why we have a Yavam here. But we said there's another brother. Shekidesh Achiv. Then his brother, the brother of the Yavam, goes and betroths as Achoisa, the sister of the Shemeres Yavam, the woman her husband has died. He goes and betroths the sister after she became somewhat attached to the two brothers, because she's waiting for the first one. And if the first one doesn't do anything, then the second one needs to do it. So, but now the second brother goes, he betroths a sister, the other brother goes and betroths her sister. So what do we do with the second brother? Let's say Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Reuven died. So his wife needs to be Miyav. Shimon, the second brother, and then Levi, the third brother. Levi goes, the first one was married to Rachel. Reuven was married to Rachel. And Levi goes, the third brother, the second after the Shimon is the older brother. Then Levi goes and gives Kiddushin to Leah. Leah is Rachel's sister. He gives her Kiddushin. Question is, are we going to allow Levi to marry her, or are we going to say, no, she's not connected yet to Levi, because there is Shimon there. Let Shimon deal. She's connected to Shimon. Levi will only come into play if Shimon doesn't Makadish. So, but as long as Shimon is there, so let Levi go ahead and marry her. And at that point, if Shimon doesn't want to marry her, too bad. There's nobody else. He'll have to either give Chalitza or he'll have to marry her. So let's do the Rashi. Shomeres Yavam, meaning Mitzapel Yivama. She's waiting for her Yivama. She's waiting for Shimon. Umitzvah begodel liyabim. The mitzvah is the older one should do. Shimon should do the. So bo echad mina achim. So then one of the brother comes. We'll call him Levi. The kiddush es achoiso shel Yivama. He was mekadesh, the sister of the Yivama. Achar shenofla Yivama lifnei. After the Yivama has already fallen before them, which means after Reuven died. And now Rachel needs to be miyubim either by Shimon or by Levi. And Levi goes and gives Kiddushin to Leah, the sister of Rachel. So Mishum Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Amru, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira they say, Aymanim Loi. We tell him, Aymanim Loi. We tell Levi, Hamte. Wait, you can't marry her. Ad sheyasa achicha godel ma'aser. Till your other brother does something. Don't marry her. You can't marry her. Wait till your brother do something. What's something? Either he'll marry her or he'll give her chalitza. Wait and don't bring her in. Don't marry her. Until your older brother, will do an action. What does it mean? And this yivimta and rachel. Either give her chalitz or yibam, and only then will you be able to marry Leah, who you gave kiddushin to. But as long as the yibama is still in front of all of them, some of them have to do chalitza, some of them have to do yibam. We don't know which one. One of them, mitzvah is the older one, but you all have an obligation. To each one, she is like his wife. In other words, she's connected to each one through the connection of yibum. That one of them has to be miyabim her. That makes this Rachel as their wife. The osur ba'achoisa, and you can't marry Leah. That would be the wife's sister. That would be marrying Leah would be like marrying Rachel's sister, because even though Rachel is not married to you yet, but Rachel is a zeka from a yabam, that's considered like marriage. The kosovar, because he holds who? Rabbi Chaim holds that yesh zeka afilu betrei. Even if there's two brothers, there is a connection when he has to be miyabim. The koshke bechad, for sure, there's only one brother. Basically, there's a connection there, and you can't marry that sister. You can't while Rachel is waiting to be miyubim by two or koshke by one. You can't marry her sister. You can't marry Leah. But the Rabban disagree with him. They say because there's two brothers. That attachment is not specific. That it should be on one of them. Oh, it's your wife. Because who says I'm even going to end up marrying her? I'm not even connected with her that way. So there's a machloikis between Rabbi and Beseda whether the second brother, whether Levi, will be allowed to marry Leah before there was Yibum Chalitza. Machloikis. Rabbi and Beseda is an individual. The Rabban disagree. Amar Shmuel, halacha ki Rabbi and Beseda. Shmuel says the halacha is like Rabbi and Beseda. So therefore, we see that Shmuel, it's a stretch. Shmuel worries about an individual, and he's machmer here, like Rabbi Meseda. That tells us that he should be machmer like a Ramuna. If you wait by the Megillah till it takes to the end, he's the one that says that Shmuel says he would go with Rabbi, that Shmuel said like Ramuna, because that's the style of Shmuel to worry about the single person. Unfortunately, I ran out of time. Mincha is just in about 5 minutes, and I'm home. I got to run to shul, so we'll call it a day today. We got involved here with this Yibum and things like that, so took up a little bit more time. Okay. I'll catch
Thank
up
you,
with Mr. Shem
Thank
next week, same time.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Everybody have a good night.
you.
Thank you very much.